All right. So you sent this video about this whole mall living thing,
Yeah.
converting these huge retail spaces into places where people actually live.
Mhm.
It's kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah.
But the more I think about it,
Yeah.
the more I think it makes sense. Like we might be seeing a big change in how we think about cities.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What's really interesting here is how a few different trends are all coming together at the same time.
Okay.
You've got traditional retail struggling, you've got this housing shortage,
Right.
and there's this growing interest in living in places where you can walk everywhere and have a strong community feel.
Hmm.
Malls, for all their problems, kind of offer a unique chance to deal with all of these things.
That's true. That statistic from the video really stood out to me.
Uh-huh.
Almost 70% of Americans live within an hour of a struggling or abandoned mall.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen it myself in my own city. It's
Mhm.
kind of a weird feeling.
It is.
These places were packed with people, and now they're just empty. It makes you think what happened.
Well, the simple answer is that retail has totally changed online shopping. The fact that people would rather spend money on experiences these days
Right,
and just like changing tastes in general.
right.
It's all led to traditional malls kind of dying out.
Hmm.
But I think there's a deeper reason too.
Okay.
Malls were often built on the edges of cities,
Yeah.
totally reliant on people driving to get there.
Right.
But now more and more people want to be able to walk places,
That's true.
live in more urban areas.
Hmm.
So these big suburban malls just aren't as appealing anymore.
So we're not just talking about filling empty stores.
Right.
We're talking about rethinking what a mall even is.
Exactly.
Like in the video, there was this resident who could get a haircut, go to Author Talks, and grab lunch,
Mm-hmm.
all without leaving their mall turned apartment building.
Yeah.
It's funny because malls used to be all about getting people to come inside.
Uh-huh.
And now it's like they want to create this self contained world.
Yeah.
You never have to leave.
And that's actually a really interesting psychological question.
Okay.
Is this self-contained world actually good for us or bad for us?
Hmm.
On the one hand, you've got convenience and a sense of community,
Hmm.
but on the other hand, could it lead to even more social isolation?
Right.
Like people disconnecting from the bigger city around them.
Yeah.
It's a tough balance that developers need to think about carefully.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And speaking of developers, I was surprised by how complicated these conversions actually are.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just like putting up some walls and calling it a day.
No, not at all.
The video talked about all the challenges,
Right.
bringing these old buildings up to code,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with zoning
Yep.
regulations, and just the sheer cost of transforming these huge spaces.
The financial side of it is a big hurdle for sure.
Yeah.
Converting retail space is usually easier than office space,
Okay.
but it still takes a ton of money.
Yeah.
Parking lots can be torn down and repurposed pretty easily, but the retail buildings themselves often need major work to meet the codes for residential buildings.
Yeah.
Just imagine trying to turn a former department store into apartments,
Right.
putting in plumbing, electrical, all that infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's a massive project.
It sounds like it. The video mentioned that converting office space is even harder and more expensive.
It is.
Something about the structures being more complicated.
Exactly. Office buildings often have different floor plans.
Okay.
The ceilings are different heights,
Right.
and the structural elements just aren't as easy to adapt for people to live in.
Got it.
Plus, there's the whole issue of natural light.
Yeah. Good point.
Malls by design are meant to be kind of inward facing,
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of windows or natural light.
Right.
And that's not really what you want when you're trying to create apartments that people will enjoy living in.
That makes sense. So it seems like developers need to be pretty creative to figure out how to work around these design challenges.
Yeah, they do. What are some of the solutions you're seeing?
Well, one approach is to incorporate atrium skylights and courtyards
Okay.
to bring more natural light into the interior spaces.
Makes sense.
Another strategy is to create a variety of housing types,
Mm-hmm.
from studios to larger apartments,
Yeah.
to appeal to a wider range of people.
Right.
Some developers are even trying out things like green roofs and rooftop gardens
Interesting.
to create some outdoor space and improve the air quality.
Yeah, that's cool.
So they're figuring out ways to make these spaces work.
Mm-hmm.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the human side of this.
Okay.
The video focused on Amy Henyon.
Yeah.
She lives in the Arcade Mall in Providence, Rhode Island.
Right.
She has this tiny 250 square foot apartment,
Wow.
no stove because of fire codes,
Oh, wow.
and people are always walking past her windows.
Huh.
I gotta admit, I think I'd feel a little claustrophobic in that situation.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Amy's story, I think, shows both the good and the bad of mall living.
Right.
Like, on the one hand, she's got this incredible sense of community, Everything she needs is right there.
Yeah,
But on the other hand, she's giving up space privacy and some of the comforts of a traditional home. Seems like there's some pretty big trade-offs.
there are.
Would you be willing to give up those things to live in a mall?
Hmm, that's a tough one. I don't know.
I feel like it takes a certain type of person,
Yeah,
someone who really values community and convenience over having their own space.
you're right. It's definitely not for everyone.
Right.
But for some people, especially those who are drawn to city life
Mm-hmm.
and like the idea of living more minimally, it could be a good fit.
It definitely challenges how we usually think about what a home should be.
Yeah, it does.
But with more and more people getting priced out of cities,
Right.
maybe this is a way to create more affordable housing in places where people want to live.
That's a key point. The affordability issue is a major reason why this trend is happening.
Hmm.
Housing costs just keep going up.
Yeah, they do.
And malls offer this potential space to create more affordable units.
It's interesting to think about how this could change the makeup of cities.
Yeah,
Could we see more young people who are willing to move around a lot flocking to these converted malls?
possibly.
And what would that mean for the neighborhoods around them?
Those are questions we're still figuring out as this trend develops.
Right.
The social implications are pretty complex and far reaching.
Yeah.
We need to think about how these new communities will interact with the people who already live there,
Hmm.
how they'll affect local services and infrastructure,
Right.
and whether they'll really create a sense of inclusion and belonging.
Those are all really important things to think about.
They are.
Feels like we're talking about a pretty big social experiment here, right?
Yeah.
We're taking these massive commercial spaces that were all about shopping
Hmm.
and trying to turn them into places where people live, work, and hang out.
Hmm.
What are some of the unexpected challenges developers are running into as they try to make this happen?
I think one of the biggest challenges is finding the right balance. You want to keep some of the existing character of the mall,
Right.
but also make it feel like a place where people would actually want to live.
Yeah.
Malls have a certain look,
Hmm.
those wide hallways, high ceilings, often not a lot of natural light.
Mm.
It can be tough to make those spaces feel cozy and homey.
Yeah, I get that. It seems like you almost have to demall them all.
Yeah, you kind of
I
do.
mean, all those big empty spaces might be great for shoppers,
Right.
but they could feel pretty impersonal if you're living there.
Exactly. So
Right.
developers are having to think outside the box,
Okay.
coming up with architectural solutions to break up those big spaces,
How so?
like dividing them into smaller, more human scale areas,
Mm-hmm.
adding windows and skylights,
Yeah.
using natural elements like wood and
Right.
plants to soften things up.
So it's about finding that middle ground,
Yeah.
keeping some of the things that make a mall recognizable,
Huh.
but also giving it a new identity as a residential space.
Exactly. The video also mentioned that even with all these residential conversions happening,
Yeah.
those big anchor stores like Macy's and J.C. Penney are still shrinking.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard to imagine those huge department stores being easily turned into apartments.
You're right. Those anchor stores are a whole other challenge.
Oh,
They're often the most complicated and expensive to convert.
why is that?
Structurally, they're just really complex.
I see.
In some cases, it might make more sense to just tear them down and start fresh.
So we might see a situation where these converted malls have a mix of old and new buildings,
Yeah, I think that's likely.
kind of like a mini version of the city itself.
Exactly. The video talked about the arcade where Amy lives
Uh-huh.
and that development at Flatiron Crossing in Colorado.
Right. I noticed they took really different approaches.
It did.
The arcade has apartments right inside the mall,
Hmm.
while Flatiron Crossing built housing next to the mall, but connected by green spaces and walkways.
Right. It seems like there are a few different models developing for how to do these conversions.
Yeah, it does. It's like we're watching a new type of urban space being born.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
These converted malls aren't really traditional apartments,
Yep.
and they're not quite mixed use developments either.
Right. There's something new.
Yeah, some kind of hybrid that blends residential, commercial, and community space.
It's an interesting evolution, and it's not just about the physical space.
Uh-huh.
It's about how we think about malls themselves.
In what way?
For decades, malls have been all about buying stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but now they're becoming places where people live, work, and connect with each other.
Yeah, that's a big shift.
It is. And it could have a big social impact, too.
There was this quote from the video that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
It said, "The point isn't to stay cooped up in a small apartment, it's to get out there and enjoy the downtown area."
I like that.
It seems like the idea is to create spaces that encourage people to interact,
Uh huh.
get involved in the community.
Right. Which is not really something traditional malls have been known for.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
So that's a key thing.
It's
The success of these conversions depends on whether they can actually create a strong sense of community.
absolutely.
It's not enough to just provide housing and amenities.
Right.
Developers have to create spaces that bring people together,
Hmm.
make them feel like they belong.
Yeah, and connect them to the larger community.
That makes sense. It's about turning the mall from a place where you buy things
Uh-huh.
into a place where you build relationships.
I like that. But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Are we being too idealistic here?
What do you mean?
Are there legitimate concerns about these conversions too?
Oh, for sure. There are definitely concerns. One is the potential for gentrification.
Right.
If these converted malls become really popular places to live,
Uh-huh.
it could drive up housing costs in the surrounding areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and push out the people who already live there.
Exactly. It would be kind of ironic
Yeah,
if, in trying to solve the housing crisis, these conversions actually made it worse for some people.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So developers really need to work with the local communities. Make sure these conversions benefit everyone.
Mm-hmm. Not just a select few.
It's not just about the buildings themselves.
Right.
It's about social equity and responsible development.
Exactly. What other potential problems do you see?
Another worry is the possibility of social isolation.
Okay.
If these converted malls become like their own little worlds,
Mm-hmm.
it could actually discourage residents from interacting with the broader community.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Imagine if you could get everything you need,
Mm-hmm.
groceries, entertainment, healthcare,
Right.
without ever having to leave the mall.
It's almost like a dystopian future
Right.
out of some sci-fi movie.
People living in these climate-controlled bubbles cut off from the real world.
It could happen.
Yeah.
That's a real risk that needs to be addressed.
So how do you prevent that?
Developers need to design these spaces in a way that encourages people to go outside,
Okay.
to connect with their neighborhoods and be part of the city as a whole.
So it's about finding that balance again,
Yeah.
creating a sense of community inside the mall, but making sure it's not an isolated community cut off from everything else.
Exactly. It's a tricky balance, but it's really important to get it right.
There's a lot riding on this.
There is. The stakes are high. The success or failure of these conversions could have a huge impact on the future of our cities.
No pressure.
They could revitalize struggling areas, create more affordable housing, and lead to a new way of urban living.
Yeah.
But they could also make existing problems worse, like gentrification and social isolation.
It seems like we're at a turning point.
We are.
As more malls get converted to housing, we need to be asking some tough questions.
Like, are we creating thriving community hubs or just another form of isolated living?
Are we actually solving the housing crisis or just moving it around?
And ultimately, what kind of future do we want to build in these reimagined spaces?
Those are big questions.
They are big questions that we as a society need to think about as this trend keeps going.
Feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
So much to think about. The economics, the design, the social impact.
Definitely.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
Are there any examples of mall conversions that are actually working?
Yeah, there are actually some promising ones out there.
Like what?
One that comes to mind is the Belmar development
Okay.
in Lakewood, Colorado.
What's that one like?
It was a classic dying mall,
Mm,
you know, losing shoppers to newer, fancier shopping centers.
yeah, I can picture it.
But instead of just bulldozing the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
the developers decided to try something different.
Okay.
They created this mixed use development
Okay.
with housing, retail, office space, a library, a performing arts center,
Wow.
even a light rail station.
Wow, that's a total transformation.
Yeah.
Sounds like they really considered what the community needed
Yeah, they did.
and tried to make it a place where people would want to spend time.
Exactly. They understood that to be successful,
Hmm.
they had to create a sense of place,
Okay.
a reason for people to come hang out, even if they weren't shopping.
It's almost like they took inspiration from those old town squares or
Yeah.
plazas that used to be the heart of communities.
You're right. There's definitely an effort to recreate that feeling.
Yeah.
A place where people can gather, interact, and feel connected.
We talked earlier about how these conversions could make gentrification worse.
Right.
Are there any projects that are being done in a way that's sensitive to the people who already live there?
Yeah, there are a few developers who are making affordable housing a priority.
Okay.
For example, the Collin Creek Mall project in Plano, Texas.
What are they doing?
They're including a good chunk of affordable units in the development,
That's great.
along with things like a park, a library, and a health clinic.
So they're trying to create a community where people of different income levels can all live together.
Exactly. And they're also focused on making it a walkable, transit oriented development,
Okay.
which helps reduce traffic,
Hmm.
makes it easier for people to get around without needing a car.
That's so important, especially when we think about sustainability and reducing our impact on the environment.
Absolutely. Sustainable design is becoming a big focus in these conversions.
Like what kinds of things?
Developers are using energy efficient building materials, solar panels, green roofs, rainwater harvesting systems,
Wow.
all to create communities that are more environmentally friendly.
It's like we're moving away from that old idea of the mall as a symbol of consumerism
Yeah.
towards something that's more sustainable and community focused.
It makes you wonder how this trend will change our cities and towns in the long run.
It really does. It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, but I think it has the potential to really reshape our urban landscapes.
How so?
We might see a shift away from those sprawling suburbs that rely on cars
Okay.
towards more compact mixed use developments that prioritize walkability, community, and sustainability.
It's almost like we're going back to a more traditional way of planning cities
In a way,
where people
yeah.
live, work, and play all close together.
Right, but with a modern twist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not trying to recreate the past.
Oh,
It's about learning from it and applying those principles to the challenges we face today.
I gotta say, I'm feeling a lot more hopeful about the future of malls after this conversation.
Me too.
What started as kind of a strange idea has become a really interesting look at how we can rethink our built environment
Hmm.
to create places that are more vibrant, sustainable, and community driven.
I think it reminds us that even when things seem like they're dying out,
Hmm.
there's always potential for renewal and transformation.
Yeah. And that's something to be excited about.
I
So, what's the takeaway message for our listeners?
I think the main takeaway is that these malls aren't hopeless.
Right.
They're an amazing opportunity to tackle some of the biggest challenges facing our communities.
Like what?
The need for more affordable housing,
Ah,
the desire for walkable, connected neighborhoods,
yeah.
and the urgency to create cities that are more sustainable and resilient.
It's a call to action, really.
It
A
is.
challenge to think outside the box about how we can repurpose these spaces.
So they can better serve our needs and aspirations.
It's also a reminder that the future of our cities is up to us.
I love that. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. But we want to hear from you.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
What do you think about the future of malls?
Would you live in a converted mall?
Share your ideas and join the conversation.
Maybe your thoughts will spark the next big innovation in urban design.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world around you.